Hello and welcome back to another Real with Ryan podcast interview. Today I'm joined by Noah Master. Noah is a wide-ranging, multi-talented person, as you'll hear in today's episode. He's an entrepreneur, a filmmaker, an actor, a storyteller, and a skateboarder, amongst other things. In today's episode, we cover a whole bunch of topics, so I'm sure there's going to be something for everyone. We talk about him building a Lego video empire as a kid. We talk about homeschooling with a Martha Stewart-like mother and how that led to intellectual independence. We talk about viewing failures as information, how skating and skateboarding was a moving meditation for Noah. We talk about the journey of him starting the business Arkmotion and how that led to him dropping out of college. And we also touch on his becoming an actor. Amongst other things, we'll be talking about feedback loops, intellectual independence, figuring out what makes you you, living an active versus a passive lifestyle, redefining your defense mechanisms, spectrums of competitiveness, as well as storytelling. I know you're going to enjoy this wide-ranging conversation, and there's a lot to learn from through Noah. And if you're watching or listening to this, keep in mind we did have some technical difficulties along the way, so some of the video cuts out and we did have to clip together things. That was on my end, but the conversation is still full and I know you're going to get a lot out of it. But without further ado, here's my conversation with Noah Master. Okay, and we are live. Noah, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. It's good to be with you here, brother.
Thank you, Ryan. Dude, it's good to talk to you. It's been a minute. I really appreciate you just having me out here, man.
Yep, it has been. We, for the audience listening here, Noah and myself have worked on just one project together, and then have shared a adventure of skateboarding around the University of Arkansas campus, and have some mutual friends such as Hudson Shreve, who y'all might know and love from the last podcast. But that's enough about me and Hudson. It's time to talk a little bit about you, Noah. So we have a ton of stuff to talk about today, a ton of great topics, but wanted to start off, and I don't know the backstory about this, but just asking about Legos and videos or a Lego video empire and learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a great place to start because that's kind of where I don't know where the majority of all of this began. I think if you said Lego and you said video, that basically sums up the majority of my entire childhood. So, oh my gosh, okay. So for a little bit of context, I grew up homeschooled. So until high school age, all of my education was basically done within the family. My mother pretty much spearheaded that. And so, I mean, pretty much the entirety of my childhood was finding other outlets to be creative, other ways. So I grew up in Richardson, Texas, where we were right next to one of the best children's libraries in the nation, actually. And so that's where I spent the majority of my time, was reading books, reading like a lot of fantasy novels and things. And then at home, one of my biggest passions was playing with Legos. So it's funny you say that. The video aspect of it kind of happened by accident. So when I want to say like probably the age of 12, I got one of the little red Nikon PowerShot cameras. I don't know if you've ever had one of these, but like itty bitty little square point and shoot, no video capabilities, just could take photos. And so as I would be, as like a 12 or 13-year-old, I'd be building these different sets and, telling stories in my head. And then eventually I would start just like taking pictures of the scenes in whatever story I was imagining at the time. And so what I noticed after a little while was that when I would review the photos of the story, sometimes there would be two images that were fairly close in how they looked to each other. And so as I would be scrolling through on this little camera's preview window, I would see that it would look like it was moving. And that kind of sparked an idea where I started to basically as I would tell these stories, just taking photos, I started to make the distance between images shorter and shorter and shorter, so that eventually what I'd be able to do would be watching these videos, and I just basically hold down the next photo button, and it would play through what looked like movement. And I had no idea at the time that that would lead to basically the majority of everything else that's happened in life stemmed from little things like that. So that led to um, building stop motion animation videos for the very first time.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first one I ever did was called Chess Game, and it was purely just a chessboard. I shot it on a shitty little webcam, and it was a chess game that played itself and played through to checkmate, and then a hand comes out and drops the king as the game ends. And I put it on YouTube, and I think like 12 people watched it.
Mm-hmm.
But that was enough to start feeling like I should upload more of these videos, because I wanted them to live somewhere where other people could watch them, or even if it was just a few people, I wanted to have them up there. And at the same time, I was starting to get into like live videography as well, so just filming my friends and things like that, us goofing off. But the stop motion was really the draw that just kept coming over and over again. And so
Mm-hmm.
as that happened over the course of probably the next 5 years, the production quality on the videos got better. I started building fancier sets. I started to add sound effects and muzzle flares and explosions and things like that into the video. Just started going wild, basically, with whatever ideas I could think of at the time. And people started to watch them. So, I mean, probably over the course of those like 4 or 5 years I was on YouTube, eventually like millions of people started to watch them, which was ridiculous. I had like some first videos go viral, and which I feel like YouTube's evolved now. Viral is like a totally different definition. But back then, if your video had like 500,000 views, that was crazy. You know, this is before we had any videos with like billions of views on them. And so the funny thing about that is there was really no thought of a career or monetizing the videos or anything like that. But then so my family is pretty connected to a tax firm called Ernst & Young. And so they actually approached me as I was doing these videos, which was very much out of the blue. And they asked me to produce one for a conference they were having. Basically, they wanted a fun, engaging way to tell people information about like taxes and things like that, which I don't find very fun. But there was a way to make it engaging. And so that was the first job I did where they actually paid me money to make a video. Before that, it was only me spending like whatever money I could scrape together to make just stuff for myself. And that video kind of changed everything, because we went out to Florida to, what was it? The Disney has a whole series of hotels out there, like the Dolphin Hotel, and I don't know if I remember the other ones, but they did the conference there, and they had thousands and thousands of people there all attending this conference. And they played the video on an enormous screen in this room, and I'm there at like 13 or 14 in the back watching everybody watch it. And there was this like psychological shift where it was like, oh, people are laughing, people were engaged, people thought it was cool. And so I mean, and this maybe side tangent, I feel like most things in life operate as kind of a feedback loop, where one positive thing leads to another positive thing, and that spurs you on to do more. Like you've had that experience with the podcast, where it's like you had some really cool conversations from the first ones, and you're like, oh shoot, I got to do another one of these. I think there's just a cool feedback loop. And so that's what it was for me. Is then I went like balls to the wall video. I joined high school, so now I was all around all these other young kids. Everybody's figuring it out. And so I was the school videographer there. So I would produce all kinds of videos for them as well, for the school, just skits and things like that. But yeah, no, the Lego videos were what started it all. That was really the first, I don't know, that was probably the first time in life where a group of other people I didn't know really saw something I did and liked it, and it spurred me to do more. And
Mm-hmm.
that led to so many other opportunities and choices in life I would never have expected to make. But it all stemmed from just playing, just having fun.
Man, that's
Mm.
awesome. The one photo at a time. I love that it was just you playing with Legos, looking at these photos and just scrolling through that kind of was the origination of the idea that you could create videos from
Yeah.
it. I do agree with the idea of kind of like that feedback loop, though.
Hmm.
And I say that, I am just a culmination of all the experiences and feedback that I've gotten up to this point. And, the journey while you're on it feels a little bit random. But whenever you take
Right.
a moment and look back at everything, you can kind of see
Mm.
some of those building blocks and early experiences lead to the person that you become. You mentioned your parents homeschooling you
Yeah.
and your mom specifically kind of being the champion of that. Do you know why they chose to, homeschool you versus the other options like public school or private school? Do you know any of that, the genesis of that decision making?
I yes, I think I do. So my interpretation of that, and this is kind of a funny thing, just because I've had to talk to a lot of people about this, sometimes even professionals, as you kind of figure out childhood and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just stems entirely from, I don't know. I think every family dynamic is different, and our family dynamic is that of independence.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is a fiercely independent person who wants to go their way and wants to do things their way. And so I think for most parents, when they choose to homeschool their kids in any way, it's because they want more, I don't know, more influence, more control over how, the person that they made effectively gets educated.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that would be my assumption, is it was just about, I want to do this myself because I want to know it's done right,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
very characteristic of everyone in our family. Everyone's very much a, let me do it, let me do it, let me take care of
Mm-hmm.
it, because I have a certain way. I hope for something to be done, and if there's a chance I can land myself and do it, then I'd like to.
Yeah. And you said you were doing homeschooling all the way up into high school or through high school?
No, no, no. Up until high school.
Until
Yes,
high
ninth
school.
grade was the first grade with a range of other kids.
Yeah.
And even then, our class was very small. I think I had 37 people in my graduating class.
Oh, wow.
So everybody knows everybody. Everyone knows everybody's dirt, which is just a interesting dynamic, because I'll meet people who they went to high school or college and they have thousands of people in their graduating class. You could
Mm-hmm.
meet new people every single day who you never met before. Whereas with this, it was like everybody was aware of everyone, for better or for worse.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that experience like if you can recall you were raised and taught by, your mother, your parents for so long. I assume you had, a sibling or siblings. I'm not sure about that.
I got
Um
three.
three siblings. What was it like to finally collide with all the other kids in a way where you presumably didn't have a ton of time being immersed in this culture with everyone else and then just seeing how crazy it can be to be surrounded by even as few as 30 other kids.
You bet. You bet. Um, first of all, sensory overload, pretty much.
Mhm.
Like socializing overload. There was definitely a period of time where I felt like I was playing catch up
Mhm.
almost. I think it's only as I've become older, probably into my, like, now I'm in my mid 20s. So only as I've gotten older have I realized that there were advantages to growing up that way.
Mhm.
Before, when I first had that experience, it felt like it was overload, and I felt like it felt like I'd missed out in some form or fashion, and I had to play catch up, which I felt like I was able to do fairly eloquently as as time went by, but there was definitely a rough, probably freshman and sophomore year were probably pretty rough as I
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of figuring out probably some cues that other kids would have learned faster,
Mm-hmm.
just based on being socialized at a younger age. It's as I've gotten older that I've really come to appreciate what that route did, though, because I think it preserved my ability to operate independently, to think independently without really caring too much about what somebody else is doing or what a large group of other people are doing,
Mm-hmm.
because in the past I just had to figure it out effectively for myself, how to handle those kinds of situations. So I feel like it's a strength now. I almost think of it as a superpower now that I avoided that time, but there definitely was a sense of playing catch up, or
Mm-hmm.
feeling like people knew more than I did about I don't know, some aspects of life, like talking to women and things like that nature. I felt like
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn all that later in life, and just how to make friends in that same way.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I kind of relate to that in a little bit. So I wasn't homeschooled, but I had in a little bit of a
Hmm.
sense a strange childhood where my parents were divorced, and I
Hmm.
spent half of the week at one house and then half of the week at the other parent's house
Who
from
got you for weekends?
I split it. So Saturdays and Wednesdays was the cutoff. So
Mm,
half the week and half the weekend at one house, and half the week and half the weekend at the other. And I was an only child. I did have three step brothers who married in, but
nice.
that being kind of like an only child at one house and then having three stepbrothers at the other, and then kind
Mm,
of being a kid that's experiencing two completely different parenting styles at the same time gave me a lot of just autonomy in my decision making. And I
mhm,
didn't realize it then, but I can look back and be like, oh, wow, my dad and my stepmom were kind of type A personalities who were very much, work hard, study hard, like get your stuff done, like get straight A's, like do all the extracurriculars, etc.
mm.
My mom and stepdad were super kind of laissez-faire and just, hey,
Interesting.
as long as you're not burning the house down, it's okay. And really seeing how these two sets of parents like view the world in different ways but are equally, quote, successful, gave me
Mhm,
like the view that, like my parents don't know everything, and for that matter no one seems to know everything, and so it puts a lot of responsibility on you as an individual to kind of figure things out for yourself. And so
mm,
I feel like that's likely, in a similar vein, kind of what you got through your upbringing with homeschooling. But
mm,
how so now that you have, been homeschooled up through high school, you're a little bit older, you can look at that from a distance and realize some of the things you
mm.
got out of it. Do you imagine if you were to have kids that you would want to homeschool them, or how are you, have you even began to think about what that would look like?
I have thought about that. I think only recently I've started to even consider the idea of, I don't know, having kids, marriage, things like that. Um, I don't think I would do it. I don't think I would do it, but purely because I want, I want to have children one day. Ideally I'd like to have a couple, like a boy and a girl. That'd be so cool. Um, I want them to have the experience of being exposed to I don't know, diversity effectively. Like, I want my kids to grow up one day where they're around kids who don't look like them and don't talk like them and don't come from the same economic or like the same background as them. I think it's really important that you, I don't know, that you mingle with lots of different people, so you cement it in your brain at an early age that it's like, oh, my version of reality is not the only version. Everybody doesn't have the same challenges as me. I think it's just a matter of empathy. I want my kids to have the have the chance to grow empathy from a really early age. And I think if I keep them in effectively a bit of an echo chamber, it's going to make their lives probably harder when they eventually are dropped in that reality. So I'd rather do it from the beginning. I would be selective though about where they're going to get their education. So I think being with other kids, yes, I think that's critical. But I think I'd probably be selective about what kind of school they're able to go to, and I'd like them to go to a school where I don't know, where they're not put in a box, like maybe some strange alternative school or something where maybe you're not educated in the same process that the current public education system, the mainstream public education system operates in, because I found it did not, I don't know, it didn't like service my growth in the way I wanted. I felt like the most of it taught me how to fall in line and how to follow rules and how to fit in with other people when, I don't know, I think the goal is not to fit in. I think the goal is to find the things that make you you and are unique, and maybe other people don't have them or they find them strange, but that's your thing. So I want them to be able to be who they want to be without having limitations, minus keeping them safe and things like that. This is early though. That perspective could shift at some point. I don't think it will, but that's about as far as I've thought in terms of how am I going to educate my kids. There's a few steps in between I need to pass through before I can do that.
Righty. Okay, so back on things. Sorry, audience, if there's some clippage here. Definitely some technical difficulties for me to work out hosting a podcast. But okay, so we're talking a little bit about homeschooling, a little bit about how we might raise our hypothetical children, which is exciting. I wanted to ask a little bit of a question, one more question about homeschooling, and that is, how did your mother, presumably, who is, teaching you the most, how did she go about nurturing some of these
Mhm.
creative pursuits in you early in life that
Oh,
led
great question.
to taking photos, doing stop motion, etc.? How did she and yourself figure out that you had this creative passion, this inkling for storytelling and crafting and building, and how did that begin to get fostered in your life?
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's a great question. Um, the overarching answer is fairly straightforward. My mother is an art teacher.
Mm,
Um, so she's got the liberal arts degree and such. And so what she would do, and maybe this is some good context. So my
mm-hmm,
mother is like a Martha Stewart, Joanna Gaines type woman, like just massive creative output all the
mm-hmm.
time. Our family has kind of a funny dynamic in that my dad is not. I wouldn't call him like a traditional dad in the sense that he's not into like, I don't know, the very American portrayal of a dad.
Yep.
He took a very different route. And so my mother was actually the one who taught me a lot of she was the one who like inspired me with a lot of the technical sides of things. Like she taught me how to like work on motors,
Mm-hmm.
like how to
Interesting.
yeah, how to take an inch. I think she fostered the idea of, well, fix it. How are we going to fix it? Just like look at
Mm-hmm.
it really closely and you can understand it. That's something that I mean, she's one of my inspirations, always.
Mm-hmm.
But she really was the first person who taught that idea of, for most challenges, where it's like, well, you can figure it out. Just like really look at it, really think carefully about what you want to accomplish, and you'll
Mm-hmm.
find a way. You don't always need to look to somebody else who's a specialist in something to have, to get what you need. It's within you already.
Yeah.
Um, so as we were growing up, pretty much from the beginning, part of our education was always mixed media arts and things. Like I learned to paint with watercolors and oil pastels, how to do paper mache, I mean, they got me my first Lego sets and things like that for Christmas. Like
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't spend really any of my time as a kid like playing video games or watching TV. We weren't really a family like the leave the TV on kind of thing. We didn't really do any of that.
Yeah.
It was more like go outside, go do something, go
Mm-hmm.
read a book or whatever. um, and so partially by necessity, I would go seek out these other activities. But she was always hosting classes for like other families that were homeschooling. They would come over and we would do art classes together where we'd all paint or we'd do paper mache or build something out of wood. Um, so she really did that from the beginning. So I always had a sense that I could figure something out if it was challenging me, and B, just how much fun it was to just make something. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think now I really even respect this idea more as an adult once I look back, realizing she really taught me. She taught me that you want to do more than just consume. You want to create, and you should try to. At least I personally, I try to balance time in consumption and time in
Mm-hmm.
creation. I don't want to just take.
Yeah.
I want to make and I want to give back. Because somebody has to do it. Somebody has to do it, and someone is having a ton of fun doing it. And I think the most exciting opportunities in life come to those who are creating value, who are having fun, who are giving back, who are making as opposed to just taking. And
Mm-hmm.
so that idea was like kind of put in my brain like very early on that A, it's fun to be creative, B, you can figure it out, and C, um I lost the third point, but so that was just really
Yeah.
something she instilled in us from the beginning. But she's an art teacher, so that was kind of a natural. It was a natural progression for things.
Yeah. Well, that is music to my ears because my girlfriend is an artist, graphic designer, anything
Nice.
art. She is just a powerhouse. And in a way, podcasts and media and some of the stuff I do has an art to it, but it is a completely different realm than the paintings and the sewing and the graphic design that my girlfriend does. That is just a whole different caliber of creation in my eyes. And so
Mm,
hearing how much your mom was able to kind of provide that inspiration and nurture that creative side
mm,
of you and your siblings and even other children. I love to hear that. Yeah, really, really cool stuff. It also like
mm,
reminds me of kind of the idea that I'll think about of living a active versus kind of a passive
mhm.
lifestyle. And I
Right.
think a lot of people tend to fall into passivity or being passive and kind of letting things happen to them. And so going through life not exactly pursuing what it is that makes them unique and beautiful and creative, but kind of letting things come into them, whether that's jobs or going to college or
Mm,
opportunities to start businesses. Lots of people I think will be passive and let things happen, whereas I
mhm.
really love to think about how can you pursue and actively go after the things that you want to create and
Right.
pursue. So
Now,
I
if I could,
really,
oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
Um, I think that's very true. I think that's very true. I just had the thought, so I wanted to share it. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it is very possible to end up in that state where you just consume. But thankfully, I don't know. I really believe that almost anyone has that capacity within themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
it just takes a push. I think for most people,
Mm-hmm.
there's a more extraordinary version of life right around the corner, and it just takes a push. It just takes some form of inspiration to get you going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so thankfully, I don't think it's something that it's like some people just have it and other people don't. I think it's just very much something anyone has access to if they believe they have access to it.
Yeah.
And I do think I don't know as I've grown older too. Um, I think part of like my purpose as a person is to help provide that push, just as other
Mm-hmm.
people constantly creatively like push me to do more or be more or find new interests and avenues that I like. I think it's kind of our job to pass it down the chain
Yeah.
to give other people that push and like look, it's like we're basically living in a real life GTA. You can pretty much do what you want if you put your mind to it and are willing to try. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. I think a lot of people are just afraid to try,
Yeah.
or life or things have worked out in a way where there's certain disadvantages or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll be the first to say I've definitely been given some privileges and advantages in my life which have allowed me to go pursue the things I'm interested in so freely. So I don't
Yeah.
think the expectation is everybody's on that same, not we don't all have the same access to opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think it's possible to flip the switch and go from just consuming to creating fairly quickly if you just effectively so choose to do and just are willing to
Mm-hmm.
try. I don't know. I just think there's so much information out there. Like everything I've learned to do, whether it's video or I mean, I also here in Austin, I'm also training in acting. I also run a business. I also
Mm-hmm.
am involved in graphic design and things like that. All of that was basically learned on YouTube. Like
Yeah.
I didn't learn it in business college. I didn't really learn it in high school. It was all just the things I sought out.
Mm-hmm.
But the resources are so available now that there's almost always an opportunity, a way that the switch can be flipped, if that makes sense. Sorry, just long
Yeah.
tangent, but I just got
No,
excited.
I completely agree. I do think that everyone has this creative capacity to live basically a more active life where they're pursuing things that resonate with them as a human and as a person. And like you said, can be pushed into that or nurtured into that switch can be flipped. But it
Hmm.
is sometimes hard to kind of get through that threshold. And one thing that it makes me think of, and I kind of want to ask you this, is about sitting with discomfort and
Mm.
failing. Because I think what ends up stopping a lot of people is the inability to sit with failure or discomfort or not being good at something long enough to kind of have that switch be flipped. You
Right.
know, we
Hmm.
get scared of trying something new and get scared of putting our creative work out there. And getting through that first initial hump can be terrifying. So I wanted to ask,
Mm.
what are perhaps some examples of times that you have either faced failure and learned from it, or how do you think about that initial stage of trying something new, sucking at it, and like sitting with that discomfort that you're
Mm.
not yet that switch hasn't been flipped for this new venture?
Gotcha. Right. Okay. I mean, I think the very first thing, and once again, I can really only speak from my own experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that flips the switch is once again the relationship you have with viewing something that's uncomfortable or
Mm.
viewing something that we call a failure. I've tried to reframe how I view that, because I
Mm-hmm.
mean there's that, what is that? There's an age old saying where it's like you learn more from a loss than you learn from a win, which is
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like beating a dead horse, I feel like. But as I get older, I feel like that's become more and more apparent that any loss is actually a gain in disguise.
Mm.
Everything is information, everything is energy. So if I view something negative happening to me as something negative, then it will be that way. But if I
Mm.
view something negative that happens to me as just information, and I view it as, okay, this is something that I'm basically being taught a lesson. That's
Yeah.
um can I talk about psychedelics and things on here?
Totally fine. Yeah.
Okay. Um that's when I was in college, I had a strong paradigm shift, and I think there are different tools for different people to understand themselves better. And for me, that was something that was introduced to me.
Mm-hmm.
Psychedelics were, and that was something that shifted my perspective on on suffering and pain in general,
Hmm.
with kind of the end message I learned was basically lessons are taught until they're learned. I think at least this is how I feel about it. The universe teaches you a lesson over and over and over again until you learn it. And you go, oh, okay.
Mm.
You finally, when that clicks, then it's on to the next thing, I feel like. And so I think pain is basically a information signal. It's an energy signal saying something needs to be adjusted, something needs to be tweaked, or you need to think about a situation in a different way. So for an example of failure, I mean, the very first business I founded, like I dropped out of college junior year, right about to go into senior year, to found our, with some of my very best friends in the world, Noah Todd, Will Anderson, Jed Ramos, amazing people. Shout out. Um, we founded our first business, and I mean, that was a very big leap of faith. That business failed
Mm.
effectively. Like that business, we ran out of money when COVID started. We had, considerable amount of revenue lined up on the table for to sustain our business, and then when the pandemic hit, life took a totally different turn, and we had to shut that business down. We had to, there were certain relationships with some people that didn't go the way we wanted, and in the moment when those experiences first happened, we were, all of
Mm-hmm.
us collectively, we were very frustrated and upset and kind of angry at the world, um, because it was like we all got knocked on our asses. Like I felt like
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I'd failed, um, and then I don't know. As time went by, I began to realize that it wasn't the end of the world. That failure was just, it was just one piece of information. I learned
Mm-hmm.
so much from it that the next, now I have several other businesses I'm involved in now. One of them I founded myself, and the other one was founded within our family. But those are just new opportunities, and I'm not making the same mistakes I made in the past. I guess I'm making new mistakes now. But so the failure itself is
Mm-hmm.
actually information. And so now when something painful happens, if I experience a rejection, if I experience a failure, it still hurts.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like a third person character in my head, if you will, that's just hanging out, carefully watching everything that happens, always observing everything that's happening, every win, every interaction with people, every failure, every setback, every rejection. It's watching everything. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like that voice is the part of me that's already experienced failure, and it's saying it's just information. Don't be so attached. Why are you so attracted to the outcome?
Yeah.
Instead, just accept this is what is. There is no other version of reality you're in right now, but I can choose to be down bad about it, or I can choose to just take it in stride and try again, you know, which
Yeah.
is, I think, is a very rewarding, I think is a very exciting thing, because it means one day, the people who are trying to accomplish things, one day you'll be at a different point on the mountain. Maybe you'll be at the
Mm-hmm.
top of the mountain, and you'll look back, and I myself, I'll be thankful for the times when I was struggling, when I was really trying to figure it out, and I didn't have the same momentum that I'll have at that point in life, or the connections or the opportunities. And then all of it will make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it won't matter that there was failure then, because it was just information. It was just energy for later down the line. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of my perception of failure now. Some things still suck, without a doubt, but
Yep.
there's a salve, and that salve is just knowing it's just energy. It's okay.
That's a great perspective, and I love the idea, and I actually haven't thought about this myself, of perceiving, failure and really, winning as well as just information. Like
Yeah.
all these experiences, despite the outcome, is just information that you can use. And being able to perhaps take a step back from the moment you're living in and the emotions of what's happening to you, and view things from that, sager outside perspective of information, I feel like is a superpower that, you
Mm,
can use to use that information going forward, but then also, bring yourself some calmness and presence within the
yeah.
moments of failure themselves. Um, I do want to ask this paradigm shift. So, being able to see failures as information, being able to provide yourself with this almost ability to look at what you're experiencing from a third party perspective, was this paradigm shift something that happened like the snap of a finger? Was it there was life
Mm,
before and life after? Or was this kind of like a slow, bubbling realization that eventually kind of clicked but culminated for you? Was there a before and
mhm.
after for this kind of paradigm shift?
That's a great question. I have many answers for this. Um, I think it's something that's built up over time.
Hmm.
I think it's almost like a muscle that is strengthened. If I look at where that came from, ironically, I think it comes from pain. I
Mm.
think, and I'm likely not the only one who feels this way, but there were times as a kid, in my developmental years, where, how do I say this? Where I had to disconnect, where basically I had to separate myself from a situation where I was unhappy, or where I
Hmm.
felt shame, or where I felt like I was being suppressed in some way. So I think it originally started as a defense mechanism, this idea that,
Hmm.
okay, it's almost too painful to just be in this moment. It's almost
Yeah.
too much because I don't, at that time, especially when I'm younger, I don't have that same awareness that, pain is a gain, if we're going to say it like that. So the
Hmm.
only thing I think I knew how to do at the time was to effectively disconnect and watch everything instead of being right in it, because being right in it was too painful. And as I've gotten older and I've, gone to therapy and things like that, and learned to process what a situation is doing to you effectively, like how to watch yourself, I
Hmm.
I think that defense mechanism has evolved into a tool in my tool belt, if you will.
Hmm.
It's turned into something I can use at will, where it isn't just an automatic reaction that happens because I was in something that was uncomfortable. Now it's something I can turn on to just, it's like a background program you can let run.
Hmm.
But I think it was built up over time originally through actually separating from a situation. So
Yeah.
I think the challenges in life are I think different, at least for myself personally now, because now the challenge is how to engage the most in the moment, how to go in the most while having that I don't know, that tool, the
Hmm.
disconnection tool, or the stoicism tool, we can call it,
Yeah.
like having that tool. Now the goal is, how can I go in the most, how can I be the most present with people with the least inhibition or caring about outcome or what they think of me or anything like that. So I don't, do you feel like that answers your question?
It does. It does. It's really powerful. And when you were talking about that, as in, this reaction that you have in these hard situations could have been something that, started as a defense mechanism when you were a kid, and perhaps it was necessary and needed then, and these
Mm,
same reactions might be evoked in more current and modern times, but might not necessarily be as useful as they once were, or perhaps could be used in a better or more productive way. And it reminds me
mm,
of the idea, I believe, in psychology that I think they refer to as parts work. And so you
okay.
can imagine yourself, if you close your eyes and look at your psyche and imagine yourself as a bunch of different people sitting around a dinner table,
Like
and there's a
Inside Out or something.
yeah, yeah, and like Inside Out, and part of you is maybe this this scared child that when something happens that doesn't go the way you want, wants to scream and throw a tantrum. And this other part of you might be the more wise part that wants to break down things into their component parts and create a solution. And there's probably another part that wants to just close their eyes and turn away and look from the situation. And there's these different parts of you that have different reactions to situations. And I feel like part of the process of learning who you are and utilizing, yourself to your biggest potential is being able to understand which parts of yourself live within your brain, how they react, and whenever a situation comes up, inviting the part that's going to be the most useful to
Hmm.
stand up and speak. And so
That's
there might
great.
be
That's great.
times where you're faced with adversity where it might be best for you to, turn things off for a little bit and disconnect. But there's also likely times where, your business fails, something horrible happens, and you need to bring that problem solver to the forefront and say, "Hey, we need to come up with a solution for this." And then
Hmm.
there's also likely the empathetic, the caring, the communicative, the loving parts of your nature that says, hey, maybe something dreadful happened to my friend. I don't need to solve this problem, I need to be empathetic. And so
Hmm.
being able to view these different kind of reactions as parts of yourself and utilizing them whenever they need to be used, but also being able to dismiss them when you understand, hey, this screaming child inside my head, this, I appreciate you for whenever you're needed, but right now you can take a seat, sit back down at my mental table. So yeah, that kind of reminded me of that. A interesting segue, but I wanted to make sure we talk about skateboarding. And
Ah,
you were
yes.
mentioning how you have these tools now that allow you to process and deal with failure or keep your sanity or stay grounded and in the moment. And I'm speculating, but I imagine skateboarding and activities is a way that can help you perhaps loosen the lid on the pressure cooker that might be your head. At least that's how exercise is for me. So I would love to just first of all ask: is skateboarding one of those tools in your tool belt for de-stressing? And when did your love for skating kind of begin?
Absolutely. This is fairly be warned. This is a topic I can talk about for ungodly amounts of time. Um,
Okay,
all
perfect.
summer. Um, let's see. Skateboarding. Goodness, yes, this is a big part of my life in
Mm-hmm.
that it's something I do every single week. It's something that keeps me in shape. Um, it's something that allows me to meet a lot of interesting people, and I love the culture of it. I think the most valuable thing it does, and I realized this in college because that's when I really got into it. Um, like freshman year of college was really when I started going and meeting people out at the park and going to spend time there. The thing that I love the most about it is that it is a form of meditation. I it took me a little while to realize that, like, what it was doing to my brain is effectively the same thing that happens when you do like Wim Hof breathing or any form of meditation where it's watching your thoughts and then letting them all clear, letting them all go, just releasing, accepting. It does that on cue for me pretty much. The second I'm on the board, everything else goes quiet, everything else goes blank for, hours at a time. Um and that's partially that's really why I love it. I love the community of it, but at the end of the day, it serves as exercise and a form of meditation. I also love to shoot videos of skateboarding and edit them into Instagram reels and things of that nature, and share that passion with the world. I love to share with people that that's something I love to do because it's fun to watch as well. And so I always like to invite my friends to come out to the park and see how things are. And most people really, if they have no understanding of what skateboarding is, it's fun to watch the preconceived notions break down, because there's this understanding that it's this very rebellious, anti, like, counterculture type of sport. Like, it's very angsty and things like that. And that's when we have to remember that skateboarding is basically one person's lifetime old. Pretty much, skateboarding is like 60 years old, and it's in the Olympics now, compared to things like football or soccer or things like that have been around for hundreds of years. This is a baby sport, and it's still very much in its early forms. So what I find so exciting and fun about it too is how freeing it is, in the sense that when you go to a park, anyone can be there, of any race, any gender, any skill level. It does not matter. There are no expectations placed on you to do anything there. You just come, and everyone mingles. And that's part of why I love it. Is there's just it's a truly free sport, in the sense that everybody respects everybody. There's a very strong culture of respect, regardless of any of the things that we fit in a lot of other sports. There's no competition against other people. It's only support of other people, which is something I also love. I've never been drawn to sports where you're trying to beat other people. That just never, I mean, I love watching those sports. Like, I do love to watch football and baseball and things like that. But I've always gravitated to the sports where the only person you're trying to beat is yourself. Things like mountain biking or bouldering or rock climbing or skateboarding, where it's just you versus you, and there's really no expectations on you. It's just pure, everything is voluntary. And I would love to see that exist in I would love to see that exist in more of the world too. Less expectations that you're going to do something or be something, and more just acceptance of, you're here, you showed up, and that's enough. And that's why I love skateboarding, is because when you skate, you're enough. There's no expectation that you need to do anything. You're just the way you are is good enough. So that's the Cliff Notes version of why I love that.
Man, that is a beautiful, a poetic way of looking at skateboarding that I haven't thought about. I skated some in the past, never got that good at it, but yeah, I do agree. Whenever you would go to skate parks, you would see 4-year-olds and their dads. You would see 50-year-olds trying to figure it out. Women, children, all ethnicities getting together and skating. So I love that. And I also haven't thought about the idea that it is not a zero sum sport. And,
Mm,
sometimes lots of people, myself included, I think are kind of drawn to competition and have, a chip on our shoulders. Like, we need to prove something. Like, I need to play tennis and beat other people to feel good about myself. But I do love the idea that in skating and bouldering and mountain biking and things of that nature, yeah, it is about, yourself is enough. Showing up is enough. And there's nothing to prove and there's no one to beat. It's diving into this moving meditation,
yeah.
and learning something. So I love that. Um, as far as, skating goes, when did you begin, and has this been a lifelong hobby or something that started kind
Mm.
of later in life?
I did it as a kid for a couple years,
Mm-hmm.
and then our family moved to a place called Rockwell, Texas. So they had a very small wooden skate park at the community park. So I went there as a kid, and then there started to be a lot of graffiti, a lot of hood rat behavior at that park, and so they tore it down. So then I went
uh
on like an 8 or 9 year hiatus until going to college. And then I met one of my best friends just out at the park randomly. He came up to me, and he ended up being my first business partner. Really one of the first people who inspired me to take an entrepreneurial path.
mm-hmm.
And it just happened at the park randomly. So really only like 5 or 6 years. And as a kid, I was not very coordinated at it. I don't know what happened, but later in life, it's like that side of things kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tried it as a kid, really fell in love with it as a grown ass man.
Yeah. Yeah. One more kind of question about skateboarding and perhaps that idea of competition, but with yourself.
Hmm.
You mentioned, hey, not exactly that interested in the sports where you're competing to win against other people, but you're liking these activities, these sports where you show up and you're flowing, you're in that flow state. If there's any competition, it's with yourself. Do you feel like that self kind of competition or drive to just improve on yourself is something that is like your one of your primary motivators, as well as the kind of other question of that is, are there any aspects in your life where you feel kind of competitive with other people, or is that
Mm.
competition amongst peers and groups, is that just not something that you really resonate with?
Oh, that's two good questions. Two good questions. I first I would say yes to yes to that. I don't know, mirroring choosing to be better. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm not saying that right, but as in I do think it mirrors a similar desire in other areas of life where it's like I want to improve, I want to get better
Mm-hmm.
all the time. So I'd say yes to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then is there an area where things are where I'm more competitive? Honestly, I can't think of something off of the top of my head where I really want to to compete as opposed to collaborating. I really
Mm.
like to collaborate with people and do
Yeah.
things together. I would even think in terms of things like business, I'd still say I'd rather succeed collectively than be like a we're the king of the hill type situation. It
Yeah.
If I think of something, I'll tell you. But I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I'd say in almost all areas of life, I'd rather not. I'd rather not compete with other people in that way. I don't know. Maybe that's just a wiring thing.
Yeah.
If I play games that are competitive, I will get very competitive though. Like if I
Mm-hmm.
play soccer, for example, which I haven't in a while, but back when I did, I would get extremely competitive because it's like
Mm-hmm.
once I'm in that space, in that mindset where it's like, okay, we're here to win, then
Mm-hmm.
that'll kick in. But I don't usually seek out opportunities to play in that way.
Yeah. I think that's super cool. I also think that's refreshing to hear. As someone myself who isn't the most competitive, but I can fall into that state of competing with people. And I've always played these team sports and individual sports like ping pong and tennis specifically, where tennis is one of the ultimate examples of you are facing off against one other
For
person,
real.
and it is a match of wills and skills to see like who is the better tennis player. And I think a lot of people do kind of it's a spectrum where I think some people are really competitive and want to prove that they're the best, and some people are just looking to improve against themselves. And
Mhm.
I weight lift, for example, but I'm never trying to say, hey, I weight lift more than anyone else, mostly because I'm weaker than everyone else. But like I I am competing against myself
Right.
to improve there. And I think a lot of people tend to have this idea that people who start businesses like yourself and people that are getting out there and going and making things happen are doing so with a zero sum mentality, doing so
Mm.
that their business winning means that other businesses failing, and them getting richer means that other people are getting poorer, and
Yeah,
that your wins equate to other people's losses.
and
And I
vice
think this
versa.
is, yeah. And I think this is just kind of an aura. that I am sensing amongst people over the past few years or becoming aware of. And it's really refreshing, I think, to hear that someone like yourself who has, started to make a name for yourself and in your 20s and are doing all these awesome things like starting businesses are able to do so without saying, hey, I'm doing this to win. I'm doing this to prove that I'm better than other people.
Mm,
Like you're doing this because it's part of who you are in your journey, and you want to do
mm,
so while collaborating. And I think that's just a modern and really beautiful way to approach finding
mm,
your own success. So I think that's an awesome mentality to have, and it's super refreshing for me to hear. And it just I feel like it
mm.
makes myself and other people say, "Hey, yeah, go Noah! Like we want you to win. Like that's amazing."
Oh, thank you, dude. I have so much love and respect for the people who are competitive, though. I think we
Mm,
need highly competitive people, you know, and I think competition is a healthy thing. I do want to say this.
yeah.
Even I was just talking with somebody on a walk the other day about how we raced to get to the moon. We America
Mm,
raced Russia to reach to have the first man on the moon. Like it would probably have taken many, many more years to achieve that feat if there
mm-hmm.
wasn't a competitive aspect to it. And so I think that's kind of a far-fetched example, but I think it's necessary to have
Yeah.
people who really, really are driven by competition. Because in a
Mm-hmm.
way, like we need those people to make progress.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is a spectrum, but thankfully I don't think either side of the spectrum is more positive or more negative, truth be told.
Yeah. Oh, love that. That just, comes back to the that third party perspective saying, "Hey, I am someone that's not that competitive, but man, thank God there are people like that." So really cool self-awareness to be able to
Mm.
see both sides of that coin. And I couldn't agree with you more.
I mean, I want to watch
Um
an aggressive tennis match, man. I want to see other people do it.
That's true. Yeah. If both people in playing tennis just didn't care about winning, I don't know if you'd have so much fun watching it, for sure. Um, well, cool. No, I would be remiss if we didn't at least touch on some of the businesses that you've started and some of the things that you're doing right now.
Yes, indeed.
Um, so I would love to just hear, you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation when you started with your journey with stop motion and how that
Hmm.
led to the first opportunity to showcase your art in videos in front of people and get paid to do so. Um,
Mm.
what how did Arkmotion, your first big business, begin, and kind of what was the origin of that, and how did the decision to
Mm.
drop out of school, come to fruition with Arkmotion?
Absolutely. I, I think it began like most businesses begin, which is a bunch of people hanging out in a room, and all of them have enough similarity and enough free time that they want to fill up that free time together. um, for that business, really, it was. I think it was very, very much that. It was. I happened to be. I mean, I didn't. There was no planning of it originally. It just kind of. It was just something that naturally happened.
Hmm.
I have a creative background, and I became best friends with another guy who has a very, very technical, like fast paced Mark Zuckerberg type mind, and he's a very, very strategic type person, a big idea
Hmm.
person, whereas I'm more. I can do big ideas, but I love details. I like
Mm.
finessing and perfecting one thing at a time, as opposed to being zoomed out looking at the whole picture and kind of drawing out the entire thing. I like to get into the little details.
Hmm.
um and but once again, I was in a room with somebody who thinks that way, and then I had another very good friend who is an engineer and a pilot and has a very disciplined, analytical, orderly mind. And
Hmm.
so very organized, whereas I can be fairly organized, but I mean, it's not a first priority. And then I had another friend, the last one of them, who has just a beautiful eye for aesthetics and photography. And so it was really all of us just being in a room together, hanging out as friends. All of us wanted something to do. All of us wanted to be a part of something, and have a in a lot of ways we're all looking for our identities, and
Mm-hmm.
starting a business was a way to I don't know, look out to the world and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Like, this is who we are. We're gonna do this thing. So my good friend Noah, who's the strategic mind, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
he was really the first one who proposed that idea to us, because I mean we were basically just talking about our different skill sets, and he had the entrepreneurial drive really from the beginning, and he kind of put me on. He put me on
Mm.
because he made that attractive and made it look feasible. Um, Enough for us to we all collectively agreed that we were gonna file for an LLC, and we were gonna start offering the skills that each of us had under a single name. I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember how we landed on the name Arkmotion. I think it was Ark for Arkansas, but also two of the founders were named Noah, and so it was like Noah's Ark. So it was, and
Oh
then
yeah.
motion just sounded good with it, and so I think that's where the name originally comes from. Um, and then we pretty much we worked out of a house for the first. I mean, before we had an office, before any of that, like we basically just worked out of. We had a 3-story house that we were all living in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and we turned the lowest floor into a production room where we put we built PCs so we could edit on them and do photography and video processing there.
Mm-hmm.
And the other Noah had just a fascination with cameras. I had a fascination with cameras and a lot of experience with them. And so we basically just put our heads together, and we kicked it out of our basement effectively, and then built a website and started talking to people. We were very
Mm-hmm.
fortunate too, because I mean we went to the Walton College of Business, so where they are very they're very much about entrepreneurship and support. Like, they supported us as well, which was a really valuable thing, and we were able to help them out as well. So we had the right relationships in place to feel like we could do something. We felt like we had the
Mm-hmm.
space to do something. We had the free time to do something, and so we did. Um, and let's see. I mean, as things grew, like we just steadily upped the ante. Like, it never felt like we were doing something extremely uncomfortable, but each step forward was uncomfortable, in the sense that
Mm-hmm.
each time it was kind of like, I don't know if this is all going to work. We'd be shooting live events or producing commercials or shooting product photography, and I think it's just a matter of build it and they will come, in
Mm-hmm.
the sense that if you're willing to go out and say that you are something and you are doing something. I think there's something uh, special about announcing that you're doing something to the world. It's almost like you're making a pact where you're like, I'm doing this, and I'm willing to
Yep.
tell everybody I'm doing it, and because everybody knows, I gotta make something of it. And so it's like we almost sealed ourselves into a pact, by putting out a website and getting on social media and telling everybody we were doing this thing. Um, and feel like it was just a matter of one opportunity led that positive feedback loop that we talked about. One
Mm-hmm.
opportunity led to the next, led to the next, led to meeting people, which led to the next opportunities. Um, we made friends for life. We ended up worked with some of the biggest companies in the world, which I would never have guessed that would happen, considering that all came from basically working on Lego videos, and then we're doing stuff for the Fortune 1 company, and they're just like, no, this looks good, yeah, we really like this, and it's like, you do. So I I think anybody who's going on a business journey or a creative journey, there's imposter syndrome, this
Mm-hmm.
feeling like I'm faking it and everyone will know I'm faking it. And then the truth is really that people will kind of accept the story you tell them if you believe it and you're willing to like back up what you say with work and commitment and honesty. I think that's critical. You have to be honest. I I've never been a fan of like conflating things, like making it sound bigger than it is, which sometimes sometimes that attitude had to be curbed because I would be too modest about what we were doing. And then I
Yeah.
would meet that other Noah to be like, no, 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 don't listen to him. Here's what's going on. Sometimes somebody does need to to sell the story in a way that is attractive. Um, but the imposter syndrome just kind of fades away. And then even though it didn't work, like we either all graduated or left school at the time because it got to where we didn't have enough time to do both. Like I just couldn't. I don't know. I was in school for marketing and we had a marketing company. And so all the things I was learning in class, all of a sudden it's like, why am I here? I'm like, because I started to understand, and all love for the U of A, or University of Arkansas, but the things they were teaching me, I was doing the real thing of. And so all of a sudden it just felt kind of redundant to be learning it when I realized the real way to learn it is to just go actually do it. If you're an engineer or a doctor, please go to school and learn the right way to do something. But for many things like business or marketing, you just kind of have to do it. Like you go do it. You can learn what you need to learn on YouTube. You'll find enough resources to make something happen. Please don't be building buildings or things like that without a degree, though. I hope to God. So
Yeah.
One thing leads to another, and which leads to another, and we just kind of held on for the
Yeah.
ride, and was very thankful that things ended up as they did. Even the business shutting down was exactly what was supposed to happen, and I never looked back and go, "Wow, I wish it could have." If only. No, it happened exactly as it was supposed to. It ended when it was supposed to, and it prepared everybody for the next version of where they went. We all kind of went our separate ways. We all keep in touch. One of us is in Dallas. I'm in Austin, Texas, and then we've got somebody in DC. So everybody's scattered to their four corners of the earth, but no one was ever the same, which is, I think, the best thing. The best thing, I think, is to look back on those kinds of experiences and get excited about what's coming in the future, but also just be like, we did the damn thing. We tried.
Yeah.
At least we tried, and you'll never have to know what happened if you didn't try.
That's really cool. And you know what? Maybe one day when Thanos comes back, the Avengers can reassemble, Yeah. That's a sweet story. I love that. And the fact that you started with kind of saying how you and your three other friends, just started in, a room as friends and just like started with, hey, what are we good at? And
Yeah.
how are we, where are our skills different? Where are they the same? And how can we just kind of put that together with some free time and do something with it? So really cool there and inspiring for me to try to find people that complement my skills. So I have, a certain set of skills and I probably I tend to be drawn to people that are similar to me
Mhm.
where the truth for businesses and doing something special in the world is likely in finding people that aren't the same as you but that complement you.
Mhm.
And so that's a cool lesson I'm drawing from it. I want to ask one more question about Arkmotion before moving on to kind of the final topic I think of today's conversation.
Yeah, you bet.
What was it like for the first couple clients at Arkmotion? So you said you put together, the website, you had your skills lined out. Sounds like there was a little bit of a vision, but landing those first few deals, those first few clients, what did y'all do to get those? And what in the world were those products and that process like right in those early days?
You bet. Okay. First clients we got through word of mouth. We knew someone who knew somebody who needed some work done.
Mm-hmm.
So fairly straightforward. I think word of the mouth is almost always the best. Well, almost definitely one of the best ways to get work, just because people work with people they like, or they work with people who someone they trusts. And
Mm-hmm.
so thankfully we happen to know some other people who were getting involved in business or had businesses in Arkansas, and there we were able to use those mutual connections to find work. So first jobs came from that. And then one of our first clients, I won't say who, but one of our first clients found us online, and our we had a client from hell very early on in the process. Like there's like major failures and there's like micro failures. And
Uh-huh.
and I mean very, very quickly on in our first like 4 to 5 months of having our doors open, if you will, we
Mm-hmm.
had like some clients from hell. Basically, people who just asked so much of us for so little. Back then, we didn't know how to price ourselves right, so we were already doing way too much work based on our
Mm.
time. We weren't valuing our time at a high enough rate and our skill sets at a high enough rate because of said imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, our first clients that were a little bit more pushy, I mean, they got a lot out of us for not a lot of money. And it was once again, it was an amazing learning experience where we were like, never again will we do X, Y, Z, you know?
Yeah.
So, first ones came from connections, and then first jobs. Some of them are rocky. Some of them are
Mm-hmm.
really rocky. Thankfully, some of our first jobs were also video production jobs where we work like clockwork. Like we had that down to a system very easily because we're all very familiar with the process of videography. So most of our jobs, we would be the most knowledgeable people in the room as to how to
Mm-hmm.
make that happen. So people would pretty much let us do what we wanted. Um, there was definitely a pressure, I will say. There's definitely a pressure I remember, especially, and I still feel this way sometimes, depending on the work that I'm doing, because I also, along with the business that I own and then the one I'm working with, I also collaborate with other businesses on a freelance basis, just on the
Mm-hmm.
side. And there are still moments like this where someone looks to you and they expect you to have the answers. And I mean, for me, that was kind of a jarring thing where you're like, I'm figuring out how to do something, and then somebody else is believing the story that I'm telling them that I know how to do this, and so they expect you to have the answers.
Yeah.
um, so there were definitely pressurized moments like that where people just expected us to know what we were doing because we told them we did, and then we had to figure it out. But it was fun because at the end
Yeah.
of each job, we would all basically be back in that third floor room and be like, okay, it worked. No, nothing blew up. Everything kind of worked. We got to do that again.
Yeah.
So yes, there were definitely some interesting moments at the beginning of all that.
That's awesome. Whenever I'm just a little curious how you answer or might have handled those situations when someone, let's say a client was asking questions and just kind of assuming that you're the expert and asks you something that you might have not known the answer to or had the solution for up front.
Hmm.
You mentioned earlier you at least fall on the side of honesty and being forward. How do you remember any situations where you kind of had to answer that question, and were you in the spot where you're like, "Hey, I don't really know this, but we can find that answer for you," or how did those go down? Those kind of situations where people looked to you for the answer and you might not have had it in the moment.
That's where I'm very thankful to have to have my other friends. I mean, my very best friend, like I said, he was the strategic talker and things like that. Like he's
Hmm.
very quick on his feet in terms of answers, and he doesn't have that same inhibition that I had in terms of like he can spin a yarn if he's got to. And so, truth be told, there would be moments like that where a question would be asked and I would blank, like I wouldn't have the answer. And
Hmm.
because him and I were very close friends, that would almost always be a time, at least in these early moments, where he would know I didn't know the answer. And
Mm,
like clockwork, he would drop in and he'd be like, well, that's da 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 da. You know, there
yeah.
he'd do what I wasn't able to do at that time. And that's just friends supporting each other, complimenting each other in that. So yes, those moments did come up, and thankfully I had backup. I had friends. Now I can do that
Beautiful.
myself if I have to, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, he taught you how to spin the yarn and knit a sweater if you need to.
That he did.
Beautiful. Lovely. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Dude, it
Well,
does.
Noah, we've been talking for an hour and a half. There's one more topic I wanted to discuss. This has been a great conversation. Perhaps we'll need to do round 2, 3, or 4
Redux.
sometime. But your newest kind of ventures, and there's
Yeah,
probably a bunch of them, but you've moved to Austin. We've heard that. You had this background of storytelling, of filmmaking, stop motion. You had a business where you're creating digital assets and marketing for companies, and now you are getting into more formalized acting and filmmaking.
that's right.
So I would love to hear about how this newest journey kind of percolated before your move to
Mm.
Austin, and kind of what you're working on right now.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, yeah. So so I guess the way to describe the shift into this was simply after Arkmotion, I I had a sense of wanting to withdraw from just running a business without it like meaning something. I don't know.
Mm,
That was there was a lot of like personal meaning in what we did in that business. But I it kind of in a way it made me want to try something totally different. And so really what happened when I moved to Austin with the interest of studying acting, but where that came from is I'd spent a lot of time behind the camera, and then as I kind of as I checked in with myself just creatively, like, where are you? I realized the thing that was the most intimidating to me was being in front. And not just for the sake of not just for the sake of being on display, but I think
mm,
I am my most effective if I can use myself, my personality, my attitude as an instrument. If I don't know. In my mind, the real
hmm,
if I find the most value in life in being with people, in being present with people, and I love the experience of being around others and snapping them out of the bubble. Like when you see somebody who's on kind of autopilot mode, they're in the middle of their day, maybe they're working at a store or something, and you just talk to them in a way that you really see them. You
mm-hmm,
really they really know you're talking to them and you're not on autopilot. Hi, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. Good. Thanks. You want this in a bag? You know, all that. I just can't stand
mm-hmm,
that. And there's almost no greater joy than, at least for me, than pulling people out of that and just being there with them. And so I want to give that feeling to as many people as I can. And thus, for me, I realized I need to have greater control over using myself as a storytelling vehicle, because I think
mm,
it's one thing to go look for, I don't know, it's one thing to use cameras and it's one thing to write stories, and I like those things, but at the end of the day, the true instrument I want to learn to use best is myself, and is my
mm-hmm,
own individuality and personality and conversation skills and things. I want to get really, really good at using that instrument. And I also want the ability to tell stories. And so I realized I needed to fine tune the instrument, because I think one of the best ways we can teach people what we want to teach them is through story. I think
mm,
people absorb story in a way that they don't absorb even, say, self-help content or something. It's one thing to learn when you're looking to learn. It's another thing to have something just emotionally impact you in a way that it resonates with you. You remember it. And so for me, that is storytelling. That is filmmaking, videography. It's in my mind, for myself, the method that I want to use. to reach
Mm-hmm.
people. And so I need to fine tune the instrument. So I've spent time learning the other tools, the cameras, the technical side of it, but I really want to just learn to use me, because at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, if I can use me most effectively to reach other people and be there with them, I don't
Mm-hmm.
need anything else then. I don't need any other tools. This is where I think too, I think about the people who I find the most influential and I find the most inspiring. And I think a great example of this, very simple example, is like the life of Jesus Christ, for example.
Mm.
He didn't need any stuff to be magnetic and to impact enormous amounts of lives. Just being who he was and having control over his personage was enough. And so I felt like that for me, that was proof. It was like, okay, so you really the only thing you truly need to master is yourself. And so for me, I want that medium to be through storytelling. And so that's where acting came in. So not just to be
Mm-hmm.
on display, but I wanted to work on my tools effectively. And
Yeah.
so I came here to Austin, which is one of the best places in the South you can train in this before places like Atlanta, and then obviously there's Los Angeles and New York, and you know higher end higher end spots for all of this. But Austin was a fabulous place to be. Um, so I'm training here in town. That was my original reason for moving here, and then um, and then over the course of moving here, I founded another business. So the purpose of this one too is I'm actually helping churches right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a religious person, for what it's worth. I feel like I should say that. I feel like I'm a spiritual person, but not religious. But this new business, we help churches, gain resources effectively, and we're using. I'm working with my father and working with some other very talented people, and we're going to help build a new church building using some of the proceeds from our business. We're doing that, and that'll help build a church in Rowlett, Texas, so we can have more people come, celebrate with my family, be with my family. They're a lot more religious than I am for the most part, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a community they value, and so that's a part of what we're doing. So we're helping a lot of other people out who normally wouldn't have access to the resources and the knowledge we're helping them succeed with. And then I work with an electronics business as well that our family owns, and we sell people AirPods on the internet and things like that. So very simple. And and then on the side, I design websites. I do graphic design, videography, motion graphics, and that's kind of how the whole thing fits together for the most part.
Yeah. A whole bunch of stuff going on all at once. Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Pretty much.
Um,
Fabulous movie, by the way.
it is beautiful, cinematic masterpiece. But that really cool. I love your thought process around popping people's bubbles, getting people out of that autopilot mode, kind of that passive lifestyle we were talking about earlier, and telling stories and using storytelling to bring people into a present moment where they are engaged in life. And
Mhm.
that, I think, is just one of the most beautiful things about being human, is when you can find those moments where you snap out of the trance and you're present. And that can be talking with another person. That can be, chopping
Mhm.
celery for dinner. That can be on a podcast. That can be skateboarding. It can be anything. But we always have these moments to become aware and to become present and to slow life down and enjoy the fact that what matters is the fact that you're alive and you have this
This
present
gift.
moment, and that you can do that through storytelling, and that you can even view yourself as a tool that can be sharpened and improved and built on in order to accomplish that goal of telling your story.
Dude, thank you for your energy. So positive. The time has flown by thus far. I couldn't believe it's been like 2 hours already. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's how it goes when the frequencies are flowing, however you wanna call it.
Yeah, the waveforms, they're going for sure. Well, Noah, as we're kind of bringing things to a close, are there any asks of the audience or anywhere you'd like to direct people to see you and more of your work? Of course, we'll have things in the description, as well as any questions you'd like to ask me, or just kind of anything you'd like to leave with the audience as we close up today.
Gotcha. Word and foods for thought and things like that. Well, I
Yes.
guess to everybody who's listening, thank you for making it this far. While we go on and off about all manner of topics, your story, I think almost any person is interesting to. Almost everybody has something to give. You have something to give, whether you know it or not. If you would like to see some of my work, I have a website and a blog on the website. Most people don't read blogs, but if you do, you can read a little bit about how I feel about spirituality and more about development and growth, things of that nature. You can see design work over there. I guess a fun challenge, and I'll do the same thing myself today. Go meet somebody. Go find a random stranger when you're out and about and introduce yourself to them and see how fun it is. And maybe something cool will happen. And thank you, Ryan. Thank you for this. Thank you for your energy. I've gotten to watch you for a long time doing what you're doing, putting content out on social media. I love your positivity. You have such a light about you, such a drive, and I think that's what we need. We were talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is an amazing movie by the Daniels brothers, or two guys named Daniel. Fabulous movie. They have a section of that movie which kind of made me cry when I first saw it, which is just, I mean, the movie covers so many ridiculous concepts, but the heart of it is just that we need to connect with other people, and nobody borrows a cup of sugar from their neighbor anymore. And we have to get back to the way things were. We have to get back. And I think all it really takes is just trying. It's not that hard. You just have to try. I'm telling myself that, if I'm telling anybody that, because I'm learning the same thing myself. L's are actually W's. We got to get back to the way things were, and that's about it, man.
Well, beautiful.
Thank you for your time, dude.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Noah, for joining me in this conversation and this journey. It was fantastic to speak with you today and learn more about your story, learn about all the different facets and aspects that have gone into your life and have made you the person you are today. And for everyone who's listening in, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. We'll have all of Noah's information in the description or the show notes wherever you're listening in, so you can find his website, his handles, his blogs, etc. there. And I definitely recommend you go and check it out. Also, thanks for bearing with us, as there were some more technical difficulties that were all on my end. So Noah's in went great, just to let you know. But thank you again for listening to another episode. And in the words of Noah, you have something to give, whether you know it or not. Go out there and pop people's bubbles, turn failures into lessons, be present, and live your story. Thank you for listening.